It was midnight when I opened the door to a shirtless, drunk man on the porch. 30 seconds later, my stepmother stormed in, slapping me hard across the face, screaming I'd brought a man home. The next morning, an urgent HR email. I was accused of a morality violation from an anonymous source. I smiled. I knew exactly who set this up, and I knew I would end her, right in her own corporate backyard. My name is Ray Calder. I'm 27 years old, and I am a compliance and risk manager for Cane Ridge Foods. And at precisely 1 minute past midnight on a Friday, I was finally, mercifully, home. The night had been brutal, a 12-hour audit session spent chasing a ghost in the third quarter logistics budget, $80,000 in expedited freight charges that vanished into a vendor black hole. My eyes felt like they were full of sand, the glowing green and white cells of the spreadsheets seared onto my retinas. The drive home through the fictional, sleepy town of Wexley was a blur of wet asphalt and bleary streetlights. The rain wasn't a storm, just a persistent, cold drizzle that matched the ache in my temples. Norwood Lane was dark, the kind of expensive, curated dark where everyone is safely tucked into their restored Victorians. I pulled the Audi into the driveway of my father's house, a house I was currently, and reluctantly, occupying. The only light was the antique porch lamp, flickering erratically. A bulb Verena had failed to have replaced for a week. It cast stuttering, jerking shadows across the flagstone path. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was broken only by the tick-tick-tick of the cooling engine and the sound of the rain hissing on the pavement. I grabbed my briefcase, the leather handle damp and cold, and made the short dash to the door. My heels clicked sharply, an intrusion in the quiet. Fumbling with the keys, I finally got the heavy oak door open and slipped inside. The house was silent. Thank God. Verena was likely asleep, or perhaps still out at one of her endless charity functions. The foyer was vast and cold, the marble floor an ice rink under my stockinged feet as I kicked off my shoes. I dropped my keys into the silver bowl on the console table, the clatter echoing up the grand staircase. All I wanted was a cup of hot tea, a hot shower, and 12 hours of oblivion. My phone read 0003. I had just shrugged off my damp trench coat when the silence was shattered. BZT? The doorbell. Not a polite chime, but an aggressive, leaning on it shriek. I froze. My heart, which had been beating at a dull, exhausted tempo, kicked hard against my ribs. BZT, BZT. It was insistent, panicked. No one came to this house at midnight. No one ever rang the bell like that. My compliance-trained mind skipped straight past friend and landed on emergency. I moved to the door, ignoring the peephole. It was warped and useless, and clicked the deadbolt. I opened the door just a crack, the heavy security chain still engaged. Who is it? The flickering porch light illuminated him in chaotic flashes. A man. Rain slicked his dark hair to his scalp, ran in rivulets down his bare chest, and soaked the waistband of his low-slung, wet jeans. He was young, maybe my age, built solid, and completely, thoroughly drunk. The smell of cheap beer and wet denim hit me through the 2-inch gap. He squinted, leaning in. Ray Calder? My blood chilled. He knew my name. This wasn't random. Who are you? I demanded. My voice was low, firm, the voice I used on vendors who tried to skip reporting steps. He swayed, putting a hand on the doorframe to steady himself. I think, wrong delivery. He slurred the words, his eyes struggling to focus on me. Supposed to drop this package. He had no package. I kept my foot braced against the bottom of the door. You have the wrong house. Show me some ID. No. He fumbled in his wet back pocket, his movements clumsy. I'm Wade, your neighbor. 14B. This was a lie. 14B was the guest cottage at the edge of our property, and it was empty. My father would never rent it out. My phone's dead, he pleaded, his voice cracking a little. I'm so sorry. I just need help calling a car. Can you just call me a car? I messed up. He looked less threatening now, just pathetic and freezing. I was calculating the risk of opening the door versus the liability of leaving a man in this state on our property. Stay right there, I said. I'll call a car for you. Don't move. I was about to close the door to grab my phone from the console table when a sharp click echoed from the top of the stairs. The grand crystal chandelier in the foyer flooded the space with sudden, blinding light. Every facet of the crystal threw a sharp, painful dagger of white. What in God's name is going on here? Verena. She stood on the landing, not in a bathrobe, but in a floor-length, emerald silk dressing gown, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, her makeup still intact. She hadn't been asleep. She had been waiting. She descended the stairs, not with the frantic energy of being woken, but with the deliberate, theatrical pace of an actress hitting her mark. Ray? Who is this man? What is this? Verena, go back upstairs. I'm handling it. It's a neighbor who's lost. She ignored me. She strode past me, her expensive perfume something heavy and floral, like rotting lilies, washing over me. She reached the door and, before I could stop her, she unlatched the chain and threw the door wide open. The man, Wade, stumbled back, surprised. Verena took in the scene. Me, in my stockinged feet and work blouse, and this shirtless, drunk stranger, and her face, so perfectly composed, twisted into a mask of righteous fury. You, she shrieked, her voice high and piercing, designed to carry, you are humiliating this family. Verena. Stop, I said, my voice low. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. She turned on me. Your father is gone for 6 weeks, and this is what you do? You bring this filth into his home? And then, the sound. Crack. It wasn't a slap, it was an explosion. Her hand, rings and all, connected with my left cheek. My head snapped back so violently my neck popped. The world went white for a second, a bright, searing pain that eclipsed the chandelier. My eyes watered instantly. The metallic taste of copper filled my mouth. I tasted my own blood. The man on the porch gasped. Whoa, lady. Hey, I just needed a... He didn't get to finish. Startled by the sudden violence, he took an instinctive step back, forgetting he was on the top step. His foot slipped on the wet flagstone. He went down, hard, tumbling backward onto the path with a sickening thud and a pained groan. But Verena wasn't looking at him. Her eyes, wide and manic, were scanning the street. That's when I saw them. The real audience. Across the street, Mrs. Gable's blinds, which had been tightly shut, were now open, her silhouette visible. 2 houses down, a light snapped on, and right next door, in the Kleins' darkened living room, the unmistakable blue-white glow of a smartphone, held up, lens facing us. Verena saw it too. This was it. This was the performance. She pointed a trembling, crimson-nailed finger at me, her voice rising to a crescendo for the neighbors, for the phone camera. I will tell your father what you are. I will tell him. You shameless, disgusting thing. He will know exactly what kind of daughter he has. The man on the ground was moaning. My ankle. Ugh. I didn't look at him. I didn't look at the phone in the window. I looked at Verena. Her chest was heaving. Her face was flushed with a terrifying, triumphant adrenaline. She had her scene. My cheek felt like it was on fire. I could feel the 4 distinct lines her nails had carved into my skin, already welling up, a hot, sticky liquid. My ear was ringing from the force of the blow. Slowly, deliberately, I did the one thing she didn't expect. I didn't cry. I didn't scream back. I didn't defend myself. I looked down at the man, Wade, as he pushed himself up onto one elbow. As he did, his right wrist caught the frantic flicker of the porch light. A stamp, a wet, smudged, purple ink stamp on the back of his hand. My brain, the compliance manager part of my brain that never sleeps, zoomed in. It wasn't a bar logo. It was stylized text. Clarendon Courier. File it, log it. That wasn't a bar. It was a high-end, 24/7 delivery and personal assistant service. The kind you use for confidential documents, impossible reservations, or discreetly moving guests. My entire body went cold. The pain in my cheek reduced to a dull throb. It was a setup. The name, the drunkenness, the time, her perfect entrance, the cameras, all of it. I stepped back, reached for the heavy door, and pulled it shut. Verena was still on the porch, mid-rant. And another thing, the solid thud of the oak door cut her off. I turned the deadbolt. The click was sharp and final in the sudden quiet of the house. Behind me, the sound of the front door opening again. Verena stormed back in, her face livid. "You do not walk away from me. You—" I walked right past her. I didn't look at her. I left her in the foyer, breathing heavily, the silk of her gown rustling. I went straight to the small, marble-lined powder room off the hall. I didn't turn on the main light. The small vanity lamp was enough. I faced the mirror. It was worse than I thought. 4 bright red lines, already beating with blood, ran from just below my eye down to my jaw. A dark, ugly bruise was already forming underneath. My lip was split on the inside. My hands weren't shaking. I opened the mirrored cabinet, pulled out the pristine first aid kit. I took out an antiseptic wipe and methodically, painfully, cleaned the scratches. The sting was grounding. I took a sterile butterfly bandage and closed the deepest part of the cut, near my eye. Then I placed a larger sterile pad over the whole thing. My reflection looked clinical, damaged, but contained. I pulled out my phone, my personal phone, not my work one. I opened a new, secure note. My fingers moved quickly over the glass. 0007, Friday. Incident, Norwood Lane, Verena Calder, physical assault, witness. Wade, 14B. Allegation, bringing man home, public scene. Witnesses, Gable, Klein, video recording. Detail, man wore Clarendon Courier stamp. I saved the note. I looked at my reflection one more time. Then I typed one more line at the bottom. It starts here. I walked out of the powder room. Verena was waiting in the hall, her arms crossed, the victorious smirk replacing her rage. "Grant will hear about this before he even boards his plane back," she hissed. "You're finished, Ray, in this house, and at that little job you're so proud of." My phone buzzed in my hand, a text message, from an unknown number. I looked down. "Have fun with your HR Monday." My blood didn't run cold. It didn't turn to ice. It turned to steel. They coordinated. This wasn't just domestic drama. This was corporate. They didn't just want to humiliate me in the neighborhood. They wanted to document it for a file. My file. At Cane Ridge Foods. The morality violation clause. A clause I had helped rewrite. I took a screenshot of the text, saved the number, clicked info, and saw the message was sent via an email-to-text gateway, an anonymous one. I finally looked up and met Verena's gaze. She was smiling. A cruel, satisfied little smile. She thought she'd just won. She thought she'd just ended my career. She had no idea. You don't bring a compliance manager into a fight you haven't fully documented. You idiot. You don't use a corporate weapon against the person who wrote the manual for it. She just handed me the evidence chain, and I was going to use it to hang her. I stood in the upstairs hallway, the anonymous text message glowing on my screen. "Have fun with your HR Monday." The house was silent again, but it was a heavy, loaded silence. Downstairs, I could hear the faint clink of a bottle being set on the marble counter. Verena wasn't going to bed. She was having a victory drink. My cheek was a tight, hot map of pain. The slap had been an explosion, but the silence that followed was the real declaration of war. Verena hadn't just struck me. She had executed a planned maneuver, and that text message confirmed the second front of her attack. She wasn't just trying to wound me in my father's home. She was trying to kill my career. My father, Grant Calder, wouldn't even know. He was 6,000 miles away. He'd left 2 weeks ago for Tripoli. a 6-week oversight trip for Cane Ridge Foods' new medical charity initiative. My father is a good man, a brilliant man, but one with a profound, almost willful blindness to the viper he'd invited into his life. He sees the world as a series of solvable problems, and Verena, when he met her, had been his most recent project, a grieving widow, or so she claimed, all soft edges and breathless admiration. She'd married him 3 years ago, and in that time, she had systematically transformed our family home on Norwood Lane from a place of quiet, scholarly comfort into a stage. It was a stage designed for one purpose, to project the image of Verena Calder, patron saint of philanthropy, to the board of directors and the high-dollar donors my father associated with. She weaponized his genuine goodness. The house became a revolving set for her one-woman show titled Virtue. She redecorated in humble luxury, think $1,000 linen throws and reclaimed barnwood tables that cost more than my car. Everything was a performance of calculated humility, designed to impress the wives of petrochemical CEOs and bank presidents. I'd been living in my own apartment in Grayford, a sleek, minimalist space 10 minutes from the Cane Ridge campus. I liked my life. It was orderly. I'm a compliance and risk manager. My entire world is built on finding, assessing, and neutralizing threats. I live by the code of trust, but verify, and I verify everything. Then, the Libya trip came up. "Ray," my father had said, standing in his study 2 nights before he left. The room still smelled of his pipe tobacco and old books. The only room Verena hadn't been allowed to refresh. He looked tired. "I need a favor." He didn't ask me to stay with Verena. He was too smart for that. He asked me to watch the house. "You know how she gets," he'd said, gesturing vaguely. "The alarm codes, the boiler. She gets flustered with the details. I'd just feel better knowing you were here, as custodian." A custodian, that's what I was. He'd walked me to the massive, fireproof safe hidden behind a false panel of bookshelves. He gave me the new sequence. He handed me a thick, leather-bound portfolio. "The insurance contracts are in here. The new property riders, my lawyer's direct line, the offshore account passwords for the trust." He put his hands on my shoulders. "You're the executor, Ray. You're the one I trust with the architecture. Just hold the fort, please." He was asking me to protect his legacy from his own wife. He couldn't say it, but I could hear it. I was the fail-safe. So I said yes. I packed a bag and moved into my old childhood bedroom, a guest in the house I grew up in. Verena, naturally, despised it. She especially despised my job. "It's just so unpleasant," she'd said at a family dinner last Christmas, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "All that snooping." She turned to my aunt. "She's our little snooper. Aren't you, Ray? Always looking for what people are doing wrong. I prefer to look for the good in people." The little snooper, that's what she called me. She hated that I spoke the language of contracts, of audits, of consequences. She existed in a world of social nuance, of whispered favors and implied power. I existed in a world of data, of documented evidence and binding regulations. My very presence was an audit of her. And she had more to hide than just a shopping addiction. Her closest friend, her weeping confidant, her brunch partner, was a man named Mason Drell. Mason Drell, the chief operating officer of Cane Ridge Foods, my boss's boss's boss. Mason was exactly her type. Slick, handsome in an aging frat boy way, with a smile that never touched his cold, assessing eyes. He was the one who greenlit the budgets. He was the one who signed off on vendor contracts, and for the last 3 months, Mason Drell had been the unnamed target of my quiet, after-hours investigation. I was chasing a ghost in the marketing budget, a series of 7-figure payments to shell foundations and PR firms for brand awareness campaigns that had 0 traceable metrics. It was a black hole, and I had a sick feeling I knew who was holding the shovel. The text message on my phone was no longer just a threat. It was a connection. It was Verena, who hated me, colluding with Mason, who I was investigating. This wasn't just a domestic dispute. This was a conspiracy to obstruct a corporate investigation by framing and firing the investigator, me. My move into the house wasn't just an inconvenience for Verena. It was a threat. I was a hostile auditor living in her command center. From the day my father's plane took off, the networking began. She called them charity mixers or benevolent planning sessions. They were parties, drunken, catered, expensive parties that lasted until 2 a.m. The quiet, tree-lined street of Norwood Lane was suddenly choked with black SUVs and valet services. Strange, loud people I'd never seen before wandered the halls, cocktails in hand, laughing too loudly. And Verena, in the center of it all, playing the radiant, benevolent host. "We're just doing the Lord's work," she'd say with a modest laugh, gesturing to a projection screen. I'd walk through the media room late one night, long after the last guest had been poured into their car. She'd left the projector on. It was a loop of slides, a proposal for something called the Clarendon Foundation. It was a hunger relief fund, and the logo in the corner of every single slide wasn't the foundation's. It was the bright, unmistakable corporate logo of Cane Ridge Foods. From that moment, I was no longer a custodian. I was an investigator. My treatment, already dismissive, devolved into that of a servant. She was testing me, trying to see if I would break. "Ray, the trash in the catering tent is overflowing. Be a dear and handle it. Ray, Mr. Drell is here. Go fetch his coat and get him a scotch. Neat. You can remember that, can't you? Ray, drive my friends to the club. The keys are on the counter." I did it all. I smiled. I fetched the coats. I drove the drunk guests. And I collected everything. While she slept off her benevolence, I was in the kitchen at 4 a.m., going through the catering invoices. I photographed them. The sheer volume of liquor. The line item for Glint House PR services, event staffing. The hourly charges for personal assistance from a courier service. Clarendon Courier, the name on the drunk man's wrist. The pieces were slamming into place. The parties weren't just social. They were the mechanism of the fraud. Mason Drell was funneling Cane Ridge marketing money into this Clarendon Foundation, which Verena was using to throw lavish parties that served no purpose other than to inflate her own social standing and, I suspected, to pay her friends. The Glint House PR company? I'd already run a search. It was a boutique firm. The registered agent was Verena's sister. I was gathering my evidence in a secure, encrypted file. I was building a timeline. I was going to present it to the board. Quietly, professionally. I was going to expose Mason Drell and cut Verena off at the knees. I waited. I needed one more link. One final, undeniable piece of evidence to connect Verena's social climbing directly to Mason's financial fraud. I never imagined she would hand it to me herself. I'd tried to warn her, in my own way, last week, after a particularly loud Tuesday night mixer. "Verena," I'd said, finding her in the kitchen the next morning. "The neighbors filed a noise complaint, and the water bill for this quarter is going to be astronomical. We're in a drought. Dad mentioned being conservative." She'd turned from the espresso machine, her eyes flat and dead. "This house," she said, her voice a low, dangerous hiss, "is in your father's name and my name. You are a guest, a temporary guest. Don't you ever forget that." I stood there, in my old room, the throbbing in my cheek a dull drumbeat. I looked at the encrypted file icon on my laptop. She was right. Her name was on the deed, standing on a piece of paper. But a name on a deed is one thing. Standing up to the evidence is another. She thought she was setting a trap for me at work on Monday. She had no idea that I wasn't just walking into a trap. I was walking in with the key, the map, and the demolition charges. She'd just given me the final link, an open, documented, and provable attempt to silence me. This was no longer just about a shady marketing fund. It was about the assault, the setup, the text, the conspiracy. It was about everything. And Verena, in her silk robe, celebrating downstairs, had just made the single biggest mistake of her life. She'd picked a fight with a little snooper who kept receipts. I didn't sleep. Sleep was an indulgence, a luxury afforded to people who weren't actively mapping a war. I spent the hours between midnight and dawn in my childhood bedroom, the door locked, my laptop glowing in the dark. The throbbing in my cheek had subsided into a stiff, heavy ache. The bandage felt like a mask, a physical manifestation of the target they had painted on me. Downstairs, I heard Verena finally go to her room around 3 a.m. The house fell into its heavy, oppressive silence, but my mind was electric. I was no longer on Norwood Lane. I was, in my mind, already at my desk in Halberd Park. Halberd Park, in the sterile, sprawling corporate center of Grayford, is the headquarters of Cane Ridge Foods. We are a packaged foods conglomerate, a billion-dollar entity built on the unsexy, reliable staples of American life: canned soup, frozen vegetables, microwave dinners. We are the brand family's trust, the one they turn to in recessions. Our entire public identity is built on reliability, family values, and trust. My job is to protect that trust. As a manager in the Compliance and Risk Division, I am not just an auditor, I am a guardian of the corporate architecture, and my specific, self-assigned specialty is the company's most dangerous and ambiguous weapon, Section 4B of the Cane Ridge Code of Conduct, the Morality and Public Trust Clause. It's a dusty, archaic piece of legal boilerplate, originally written in the 1950s to fire executives for getting DUIs or having too public affairs. In the modern era, it's a landmine. It's the clause that allows the company to terminate anyone for conduct outside of work that brings the company into disrepute, questions their judgment, or undermines the public's trust in the Cane Ridge brand. It is, in short, a tyrant's charter. It's the club that bullies use to beat down whistleblowers. It's the "because I said so" of corporate termination. I've spent the last 2 years trying to get it rewritten, narrowed, and defined, arguing that its vagueness is a liability, not a protection, and now, that very liability was aimed directly at my head. Verena and Mason weren't just attacking Ray Calder. They were attacking the risk manager, using the very risk I had been warning everyone about. The irony was bitter and precise. This wasn't their first move, of course. It was a desperate counter-move. I was already a problem for Mason Drell. For 3 weeks, I'd been quietly red-flagging a series of expenditures he had personally approved. They were all coded to marketing and community outreach. 3 payments, totaling $275,000, wired to a nonprofit I'd never heard of, the Clarendon Foundation. The payments were ghosts. They had no supporting documentation, no metrics, no deliverables, just a 1-page invoice for gala sponsorship and brand goodwill. Worse, Mason hadn't used his full digital signature, which would have required 2-factor authentication and a formal review. He had used his scanned initials, a lazy, arrogant shortcut, a way to say, "I'm the COO. Just push it through." The payment system flagged it. I saw it. And last Tuesday, I put a formal compliance hold on all 3. I didn't just stop the bleeding. I froze the account. I sent a polite, automated query to Mason's office requesting standard documentation per SEC guidelines. His office had been silent. Now, I knew why. He wasn't preparing documentation. He was preparing an execution. He couldn't fight me on the data, so he was colluding with Verena to destroy my character. The mechanism for this execution was the Cane Ridge Anonymous Ethics Hotline. It's a system I helped design. It's meant for employees to report fraud, waste, or abuse without fear of retaliation. All submissions are routed directly to the Ethics Committee. The final, beautiful irony? As the Risk Division's liaison, I serve as the official secretary for that committee. I am the one who receives the submissions, logs them, and prepares the agenda. They were, quite literally, handing the weapon to me, assuming I would be too stupid or too compromised to do anything but fall on the sword. Saturday, 7:20 a.m., the sun came up. The birds outside my window started their insipid chirping. The house was still. I made coffee in my room with my personal Keurig, bypassing the kitchen, my work laptop, a hardened, encrypted machine, booted up. The email was already there. It had arrived at 6:15 a.m., sent through the anonymous web portal. As secretary, I was the first to see it. Subject: Urgent. Ethics Violation. Employee Ray Calder. My heart wasn't pounding. It was slow, heavy. Each beat was a cold, hard thump. To the esteemed members of the Ethics Committee. It is with a heavy heart that we must report a pattern of disturbing and depraved private life conduct by an employee, Ray Calder. Compliance and risk. This employee lives in the home of a senior executive, Grant Calder, who is currently traveling on company business. We fear she is using his absence to engage in behavior that brings the Caneridge name into profound disrepute. Last night, Friday, October 24, she was witnessed bringing a drunk, shirtless, unknown man into the home at midnight, leading to a public disturbance. This is not just a private matter, it questions the very judgment of an employee placed in a position of high trust. We believe this conduct is a severe violation of the Morality and Public Trust Clause. We cannot, in good conscience, stay silent. A concerned colleague. Attached was one file, IMG 4022 JPG. I clicked it. The image was blurry, grainy, clearly taken on a smartphone zoomed in from a distance. The client's window, it was perfectly framed. Me, in the doorway, my face obscured by shadow, and the man, Wade, his bare chest slick with rain, leaning into the doorframe. It was a masterpiece of slander. It looked exactly like a sordid, late-night rendezvous. It was everything they needed to trigger an HR investigation and, given Mason's COO status, to demand my immediate suspension. I stared at the image, the composition, the timing, the lie. "You're good, Verena," I whispered to the screen. "You really are." But she wasn't good enough. I closed the image viewer. I hovered over the file IMG 4022 JPG in my inbox. I didn't download it. I right-clicked. My pulse was still slow. Thump, thump. I clicked Properties. A small window popped up. I clicked the Details tab. And there it was. The digital footprint. The amateur. Fatal. Arrogant mistake. They had been so focused on the content of the lie, they forgot about the container. The data was all there. The EXIF data. Stripped by some email clients, but not by the secure portal. Device make. Apple device model. iPhone 14 Pro Max. Exposure. ISO. GPS coordinates. And then, the line item that mattered. Device name. Verena's iPhone. She hadn't even bothered to change the default name of her phone. She just took the picture, wrote the email, and hit send, thinking anonymous meant untraceable. My breath came out in a long, slow hiss. It wasn't relief, it was confirmation. My fingers began to fly. I didn't delete the email, I logged it, just as my job required. I assigned it a case number, EC 2025-041. Then, I opened my own secure vault. I created a new chain of custody file. I named it Calder Domestic Incident Chain. I forwarded the original ethics complaint to the vault. I forwarded the screenshot of the anonymous text message from last night. I took a screenshot of the metadata, Verena's iPhone, and added it. I added the notes I had typed on my personal phone at midnight. I added one new crucial line of analysis. Item: Clarendon Courier, Perpetrator Risk Stamp, 0005. Item: Clarendon Foundation, Vendor File, Mason Drell, $275,000. Hypothesis: the two entities are linked. The public disturbance was not a random event, but a staged provocation using a resource, Clarendon Courier, paid for by the same entity, Clarendon Foundation, that is the subject of my financial investigation. It was all there, a single, unified, documented case. They hadn't just given me the smoking gun, they'd handed it over with their fingerprints, a videotaped confession, and a signed affidavit. They wanted to put me on trial on Monday. I was going to put them on trial first. I opened my corporate calendar. The pain in my cheek was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. I created a new meeting request. Time, Monday, 8:30 a.m., 1 hour before the Ethics Committee's standard 9:30 a.m. weekly. Attendees: Arthur Vance, Chair, Ethics Committee. Elias Thorne, General Counsel. Subject: Urgent briefing. Systemic conflict of interest and attempted obstruction of a formal audit. I didn't invite Mason. I didn't invite HR. I invited the two most powerful lawyers in the company. They thought they were the predators. They thought they were the ones setting the trap. They didn't realize they were already in my cage. The cage of procedure, the cage of evidence, the cage of compliance. I hit send. The small whoosh of the email leaving my outbox was the quietest, most violent sound I had ever heard. I didn't move from my chair for an hour. The 8:30 a.m. meeting with Vance and Thorne was set. That was the payload. Now, I had to build the missile to carry it. I had exactly 40 hours until I walked into that room. My objective? To build a case so dense, so interconnected, so irrefutably documented that their only possible response would be immediate, decisive action. The house was tomb quiet. Verena would be asleep, dreaming her victor's dreams, her face serene, thinking she had until Monday to let her poison work. She was an amateur. She didn't understand that the battle is always won or lost in the preparation, long before the public confrontation. My investigation started where her attack did, inside the house. My father, a man of methodical habits, had everything in his life linked. The house ran on a smart hub system that integrated security, climate, and crucially, the family's shared calendars. Verena, a creature of delegation, lived by it. Her entire life, her salon appointments, her networking lunches, her catering orders, was meticulously logged for the house staff to see. I bypassed the user interface and went straight to the admin panel. Calendar, V. Calder, date, Friday, October 24th. My eyes scanned the entries. 1400, blowout at Salon Rouge. 1900, Clarendon Foundation mixer, internal, and there, at the bottom, logged at 11:30 a.m. yesterday morning, 2340, Clarendon Courier, personal assist, pickup. A chill that had nothing to do with the early morning air settled over me. She had booked the service that employed the shirtless man. Wade, hours in advance. She scheduled his arrival for precisely 20 minutes before he appeared at my door. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a drunken mistake. It was a logistical appointment. Clarendon Courier, Clarendon Foundation. The names echoed in my head, in my world. You don't ignore coincidence. You investigate it. A high-end, 24/7 personal assistant service sharing a name with a fledgling nonprofit? It was too tidy. It suggested a shared origin, a shell, a for-profit arm operating under the tax-sheltered umbrella of a nonprofit, allowing money to be funneled in. Creative ways. I toggled from the house hub back to my Cambridge work environment. I pulled up the vendor file on the Clarendon Foundation. There it was, $275,000 in gala sponsorship payments, all personally initialed by Mason Drell. I ran a new search. I cross-referenced the Foundation's Public 990 form, the tax filing for nonprofits, with Cambridge's own conflict of interest disclosures. I'd seen the 990 before, but now I had a new name to search for. And there he was. Advisory Committee, unpaid, Mason Drell. Unpaid. The classic, cynical maneuver. It gave him the veneer of altruism, a talking point for galas. I just advise. I don't take a salary. Of course he didn't. He didn't need to. Why take a $20,000 board seat salary when you can direct a $250,000 sponsorship from your own company's marketing budget? A sponsorship that, I already knew, was paying the exorbitant invoices of Glint House PR, the firm owned by Verena's sister. The Clarendon Foundation wasn't a charity. It was a laundromat. It was a slush fund for Mason and Verena, financed by Cambridge shareholders, and I was the auditor who had just jammed a wrench in the gears by freezing the payments. Now, I understood the violence of their response. This wasn't just about Verena hating me. This was about $275,000. This was about Mason Drell risking his entire career, and he was using Verena to neutralize the threat. The next piece, the man himself. Wade. Why was he shirtless? Why my door? The setup was theatrical, but it was also sloppy. It relied on too many moving parts. I looked at my own bandage in the dim reflection of the laptop screen. I grabbed my jacket and my father's checkbook. The Klein's house next door was dark, but a light was on in the kitchen. Mr. Klein, a retired accountant, was an early riser. His Ring doorbell, which he complained about constantly, had a perfect, damning view of our entire front porch. I walked across the damp lawn. It was 8:15 a.m. Mr. Klein answered in his bathrobe, holding a cup of coffee, his face a mask of sleepy disapproval. "Mr. Klein," I said, my voice quiet, professional. I made no move to cover the scratches on my cheek. Let him see. Let him be a witness. "I am so terribly sorry about the disturbance last night." His eyes flicked to the bandage. "It was quite a commotion. Ray, everything all right?" "To be honest, no," I said, pitching my voice to a note of weary concern. "I'm afraid that man, the one who fell, may be planning to file a lawsuit against my father's insurance." This was a calculated lie, designed to appeal to his professional sensibilities. It was all so confusing, and I need to see exactly what happened before I call our lawyers. "I know you have a camera. Would it be possible for me to see the footage? Purely for our own liability records." I opened the checkbook. "My father will, of course, be happy to cover the cost of a full-year subscription for your security service, for the trouble." 5 minutes later, I was standing in his wood-paneled study, the smell of stale coffee in the air. He clicked a file. "Here it is. Started recording on motion at 23:50. The footage was grainy, but it was clear. It was a symphony of conspiracy. The timestamp read 23:52. The party at 14A, my father's house, was audible. There was Wade. He wasn't shirtless. He was wearing a dark polo shirt with the Clarendon Courier logo clearly embroidered on the breast. He was standing near a catering van, in a heated argument with a woman. I zoomed in. Verena's assistant, Jen. A moment later, a drunk party guest stumbles out of the house, collides hard with Wade, and douses him in what looks like beer. A full, sloppy spill. Wade throws his hands up, furious. He rips the soaked shirt off. Jen, the assistant, doesn't console him. She directs him. She grabs his arm and points. She is pointing, unequivocally, past the main house, 14A, and directly at my cottage, 14B. Wade nods, looking confused, annoyed, and drunk. He starts walking. Click. Mr. Klein fast-forwarded. 0003. Wade is at my door, ringing the bell. 0004. I open it. The argument. 0005. The sound is shockingly clear. The crack of Verena's hand hitting my face. Her high-pitched shriek. Wade stumbling backward and falling. 0006. The camera from the other neighbor, Mrs. Gable, is visible. The blue-white light of a smartphone in her window. Verena, standing on the porch, hand on her heart, playing the victim, her body angled perfectly for both cameras. She knew, I whispered, the realization settling on me like ice. She knew exactly where the cameras were. Knew what? Mr. Klein asked. She knew her angles, I said. Mr. Klein, I need a copy of this file, for the insurance. He emailed it to me. I walked back to my room, the cold air feeling good on my hot cheek. I had the visual, I had the scheduling. Now, I needed the digital link. The text message, have fun with your HR Monday, sent from an email to text gateway, an anonymous source. But anonymous is a lazy person's word for I don't know how to look. I ran the header data through a trace route. It was sloppy. So sloppy. They hadn't used a VPN. They hadn't masked it. The originating IP address was 68.1144.2019. I ran a lookup. ISP, Comcast Cable Communications, LLC. Location, Wexley. State, it was the IP address for the house. It was Verena's personal Wi-Fi network. She had staged the event, scheduled the actor, taken the anonymous complaint photo on Verena's iPhone, and sent the anonymous text threat from her own home internet. It was a perfect, closed loop of evidence. She was so blinded by her own theatrical brilliance that she forgot the digital spotlight was recording her every move. I opened a new file on my secure drive, a flowchart, the kind I build for the board to explain complex financial risks. This one was simpler. Verena Calder. Mason Drell, CUU. Personal relationship, coordinated action. Mason Drell. Clarendon Foundation. 275K Cane Ridge Funds. Fiduciary breach, unauthorized spend, audit hold. Verena Calder. Clarendon Foundation. Undeclared conflict of interest. Beneficiary via Glint House PR. Clarendon Foundation. Clarendon Courier. Shell Compagnie. Wade Larkin, employee. Verena Mason. The setup. 0002 Octu 25. Objective, discredit and terminate auditor Ray Calder. I drew 4 arrows pointing to the setup. Verena's iPhone, source anonymous, HR complaint photo. Home IP 6811 2019, source anonymous, HR text threat. Verena's calendar, source proof of scheduling courier. Klein video, 2355, source proof of staging directing event. It was a fortress. The only thing missing was a voice from the inside. I had to find Wade Larkin. It wasn't difficult. Clarendon Courier was a registered LLC. I found their dispatch number. I called, using my most polished Cane Ridge corporate voice. This is Ray Calder from the corporate office of Cane Ridge Foods. I'm calling about a sensitive delivery issue regarding a driver at the Calder residence last night. I need to speak with him immediately. 10 minutes later, my phone rang, a block number. Hello? Mr. Larkin? I said. My name is Ray Calder. I was the woman you spoke to last night, the one who opened the door. Oh, God, he whispered. Look, I don't want any trouble. I swear, my ankle is sprained, but I'm not suing. I promise. Please, just don't get me fired. I need this job. You are not in trouble with me. Wade, I said, my voice softening. You were used. You were a pawn in a very sophisticated setup designed to get me fired, and I have the video of Verena's assistant directing you to my door. A long, shaky silence. Jen, he said. She told me to go to 14B. What exactly did she tell you? He took a shaky breath. Look, I was on a break. I'm not supposed to drink on the job, but it was a long shift. This guy at the party, he just doused me with beer. I was pissed. Jen, she's the one who runs the event schedules. She came over and said, Calm down. Wade, I just need you to do one more thing. Run this package over to 14B. Ray is expecting you. But you didn't have a package, I stated. No, that's what I told her. She grabbed my arm and said, It doesn't matter. Just go. Now. I was wet. I was cold. I was drunk. I did what she said. Then that woman, the one in the fancy robe, she came out and started screaming. Ray is expecting you. The final nail. Mr. Larkin, I said, my voice pure, cold business. I am going to send a car to your location in 1 hour. That car will take you to a notary public. You are going to write down exactly what you just told me. You will sign it. It's called an affidavit. In exchange for this, I will personally handle your medical bill, and I will ensure that when the Clarendon Foundation and Clarendon Courier are investigated by the state attorney, your name is listed as a cooperating witness, not a co-conspirator. Jesus, he whispered. Investigated? Oh, Jesus. Okay, yes, whatever you need. Okay. I hung up. I looked at my flowchart. It was complete. The trap wasn't just scented, it was sprung, and the only thing left to do was to show the predators that the steel jaws had closed around their ankles. The rest of Saturday was a blur of digital consolidation. My locked bedroom, once a teenage sanctuary, was now a secure evidence processing unit. The curtains were drawn. The only light came from my 2 laptop screens and the glow of my personal document scanner. This was the work I loved. It was the work of building a fortress, brick by brick, where every brick is a verifiable, time-stamped fact. I backed up everything to a new, encrypted, thumb-sized solid-state drive, not a Cane Ridge drive, but a personal one. The chain of custody file, Calder Domestic Incident Chain, was now populated. Exhibit A, Klein Doorbell Cam, MP4. The complete narrative, the argument with Jen, the accidental beer spill, the clear, unambiguous direction to my door, the assault, the performance for the cameras. Exhibit B, Gable Cam Angle, MP4. The second angle, the one showing Verina's face, triumphant, as she delivered her lines, her eyes checking the neighbor's windows. Exhibit C, IMG 4022, JPG. The anonymous HR complaint. Exhibit D, metadata, IMG 4022.png, the screenshot, device name, Verina's iPhone. Exhibit E, IP log trace. Text, PDF, the source of the anonymous text threat, my home IP, Verina's Wi-Fi. Exhibit F, V Calder calendar. OCT24 PNG, the scheduled appointment, 23 of 40, Clarendon Courier, personal assist. Exhibit G, Courier SA. Invoices SA. OCT batch, PDF, pulled from the house's financial hub. 5 personal assist invoices this month alone, all paid to Clarendon Courier, all signed by Verina, all billed to household expenses. Verena, I mused, was a digital infant. She operated with the analog arrogance of a 1990s soap opera villain. She thought if you threw a drink or slapped a face, the moment just evaporated. She didn't understand that in 2025, every moment leaves a digital fossil, and I was the paleontologist who knew exactly where to dig. By 4 p.m., the car I had sent returned. An email appeared in my inbox from the notary service I'd used. Larkin Affidavit Notarized, PDF. I opened it. His statement was even better than his phone call. It was the terrified, rambling, specific confession of a man who knows he's in over his head. Jen, the event manager, told me to stop complaining about the beer. She said, Ray is expecting you at 14B. Just go. It's part of the job. I didn't have a package. I thought it was weird. When the woman in the green robe, Verina, slapped the other woman, Ray, I got scared and fell. I think my ankle is broken. I was never told to go to 14A. I was told 14B. Attached was a scanned copy of his medical bill from the urgent care clinic. Diagnosis: severe distal tibial sprain. I immediately paid it online via my personal credit card and saved the receipt. A clean transaction, a grateful witness. The domestic case was sealed, airtight. Now, for the corporate one. I spent Saturday night in the belly of the beast, the Cane Ridge financial servers. My formal compliance hold on the Clarendon Foundation account gave me audit-level access to every transaction related to it. I didn't just have the $275,000 figure, I had the how. I pulled the email threads associated with the payment authorizations. Mason Drell was arrogant, but he wasn't stupid enough to use his primary COO email account to lay out a conspiracy. Every executive had 2 accounts, their public-facing @caneridge.com address and a discreet @caneridgeexternal.com address, ostensibly for high-level M&A talks. It lived on the same server. It was just as discoverable. It took me 20 minutes to find the chain. It wasn't between Mason and the Clarendon Foundation. It was between Mason Drell at Cambridge External Com, and an email I hadn't seen before, vcalder@glinthousepr.com. Glinthouse, the PR firm run by Verina's sister, the firm being paid by the Clarendon Foundation. My fingers went cold. I clicked. The thread was 6 weeks long. The most recent email, from Mason to Verina, was dated last Monday, just before I froze the accounts. The final 100K of the 275K package is set to wire. I've coded it as gala sponsorship per our discussion. This should be more than enough to cover the Glinthouse invoices for your mixers and leave a healthy amount for the discretionary fund. One problem. Your stepdaughter is sniffing around. Ray called her in compliance. She's asking questions about the vendor file. This is a real threat. She's put a hold on the payment. Handle it. I don't care how. M. He wrote it down. The COO of a multi-billion-dollar company, conspiring with an external party to move $250,000 into a shell, complaining that an auditor was doing her job, and giving the order to handle it. He wrote it down. This wasn't just a conflict of interest. This was conspiracy to commit wire fraud. I saved the entire thread. M. Drell Glinthouse wire fraud, Compton EML. My next call was to Sandra, the Director of Accounts Payable. She was a 50-year veteran of the company, a stickler for rules who despised Mason and his move fast, break things attitude. I called her personal cell. It was 9 p.m. on a Saturday. She picked up on the first ring. I was wondering when you'd call. Ray, she said, her voice like gravel. The Clarendon file. Sandra, I'm putting the final report together for Vance. I need the official reconciliation. 9 months. He pushed them all through with his initial scan, she spat. No POs, no deliverables, just COO discretionary, charitable branding. It stinks. I know, I said. Can you email me the final summary report? Tonight? I've had it ready for a week, she said. A ping in my inbox. Clarendon Recon FY25. Thank you. Sandra, you're a patriot. No, she rasped. I just hate thieves. Good hunting, Ray. She hung up. The spreadsheet confirmed it all. $275,000. 9 months, all to a foundation. The legal filing for which I pulled from the state database. Honorary Executive Director, Verina Calder. A foundation that, according to its own expense reports, had one, and only one, PR vendor, Glinthouse PR, a company whose incorporation papers I pulled next. Sole proprietor, Jessica Mercer. Verina's maiden name, Verina's sister. It was a perfect closed loop. Mason, Cambridge, pays Verina, Foundation, who pays her sister, Glinthouse, who then provides the catering, booze, and personal assistance for Verina's parties. $250,000 of shareholder money, laundered into a personal party fund. Sunday was for strategy. I had the 8:30 a.m. meeting with Arthur Vance, committee chair, and Elias Thorne, general counsel, locked in. But I couldn't walk in as a defendant. The HR complaint was still active. Mason and Verina had filed case, EC 2025-0441, morality violation R. Calder. First, I needed to supersede them. At 10:00 a.m. on Sunday, I logged into the ethics hotline portal. This time, not as the secretary, but as a whistleblower. I uploaded the entire Calder domestic incident chain file, the videos, the affidavit, the metadata, the IP logs. Then I uploaded the entire financial case, the wire fraud emails, the reconciliation spreadsheet, the Glinthouse Foundation Incorporation papers. I filed a new formal complaint, case EC 2025-0442. Complainant, Ray Calder. Subjects, Mason Drell, COO. Verina Calder, external actor. Allegation, systemic conflict of interest. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, fiduciary breach, and coordinated obstruction of a formal audit. Referee EC 2005-41. This was the kill shot. Per the Cambridge Corporate Bylaws, Section 8, Article C, which I had co-authored, a formal investigation into a senior officer, Mason, for a financial crime legally and procedurally supersedes any pending HR disciplinary action against the complainant, me. The morality complaint was now frozen. Mason's weapon was neutralized. He could not, as my accuser, be part of any committee to discipline me. I had just checkmated him, 48 hours after he thought he'd won. Now for the theater. Verena had chosen a public stage for my humiliation. The dark, wet porch, the audience of nosy neighbors, the blurry camera phone. I would choose a public stage for her conclusion. A quarterly, all-hands town hall meeting was already on the corporate calendar for Monday at 10 o'clock a.m. It was a tedious values and vision update, hosted by our CEO. It was also broadcast live to all 4,000 Cambridge employees and logged for shareholders. I opened my email. I wrote to the CEO's executive assistant, Brenda. Hi, Brenda. 10 a.m. Town Hall agenda. As part of the compliance team's new Ethics in Action initiative, we'd like to take 10 minutes to spotlight one of our key community partners. The work they're doing is fantastic, and I think it would be a huge morale boost. Could we please add a 10-minute segment to honor the Clarendon Foundation? Best, Ray. Brenda replied in less than a minute. What a wonderful idea. Ray, the CEO will love this. Consider it done. Who should I invite? I smiled. The bandage on my cheek pulled at the skin. Thanks. Brenda, please send a formal invitation to our own COO, Mason Drell, who serves as an advisor, and of course, to the Foundation's driving force, its honorary executive director, Mrs. Verena Calder. We should reserve 2 seats for them in the front row. They are our guests of honor. Verena wanted to put me in the neighborhood spotlight. I was putting her on the Jumbotron, in public, in full light. Sunday was the day of the board. The digital chessboard was set, every piece in its attacking square. The 8:30 a.m. meeting with Arthur Vance and Elias Thorne was the first move, but the 10 o'clock a.m. town hall was the checkmate. My actions on Sunday were quiet, precise, and electronic. At 1400, I sent an email to the corporate events team. Subject: Seating adjustment, 10 a.m. town hall. Hi, Brenda. Confirming the addition of our community partners. Please ensure 2 seats are reserved in the front row. Center, directly in view of the main broadcast cameras. We need placards. One should read, Mason Drell, Chief Operating Officer. The second, Mrs. Verena Calder, Executive Director, Clarendon Foundation. They are our honored guests and should be treated with the utmost courtesy, Brenda replied. Will do. So exciting. At 1600, I sent the bait, an email to Mason Drell's primary account, CCing Verena's personal email. Subject: Looking forward to tomorrow. Mason. Verena. I was so thrilled Brenda could find time for us at the town hall. It's a fantastic opportunity to really spotlight the synergies between Cambridge and the Clarendon Foundation. The CEO is very keen on initiatives that demonstrate our commitment to community transparency. Verena. This is a wonderful chance to share your passion for the Foundation's mission. Mason, your insights as an advisory member will be invaluable. See you both in the front row tomorrow. Best. Ray Calder, Compliance and Risk. The trap was polite. It was corporate. It was inescapable. If they didn't show up, it would be an immediate red flag, an admission of guilt. They had to walk into the auditorium. They had to sit in those chairs. At 1605, Verena replied, Ray, darling, how lovely. Of course we will be there. We wouldn't miss it for the world. It's so important to support everyone in their roles. The subtext was thick and suffocating. She, the conquering hero, was agreeing to come. She was already practicing her magnanimous smile for when I was inevitably fired. She had no idea the email wasn't an invitation. It was a subpoena. At 1630, I sent my final text to Wade Larkin. Wade, this is Ray Calder. The meetings are tomorrow. You have done your part by providing the affidavit. You are now classified as a cooperating witness. You only need to do one thing. Tell the truth. Your medical bills have been paid. You are protected." He replied 30 seconds later, "Thank you. I'm ready." The rest of Sunday, the house was silent. Verena was out, likely buying a new dress for her victory. I stayed in my room, reviewing the 10-page executive summary I'd prepared for Vance and Thorne. I ate a protein bar. I drank 2 liters of water. I did not sleep. Monday morning, 8:15 a.m., I stood in the 54th floor executive washroom. The scratches on my face had morphed from bright red to a sickening, mottled purple and yellow. I did not cover them with a bandage. I applied a thin, translucent layer of concealer, not enough to hide the injury, just enough to blunt the color. It was clinical. I wanted them to see the wound. I wanted them to see the evidence of the assault while I presented the evidence of the fraud. My suit was a dark, severe navy. My hair was pulled back into a tight, unforgiving knot. I looked like a weapon. At 8:29 a.m., I walked into Arthur Vance's corner office. Arthur Vance, the ethics chair, was an old-guard lawyer, a man who believed in process above all. Elias Thorne, the general counsel, was the real power. He was thin, sharp, and protected the company from threats, whether they came from the outside or, as in this case, from the COO's office. They were both standing, coffee in hand, looking out the glass wall at the city. "Ray," Arthur said, his voice hesitant. He'd seen the 2 conflicting ethics complaints. He'd seen the scratches on my face. This is an unprecedented situation. That's why I'm here," I said. I placed 2 thick, spiral-bound documents on the gleaming mahogany table. "Good morning, Arthur, Elias. You've both seen case file 0442. Elias Thorne didn't sit. He picked up the document and started flipping pages, his eyes moving with terrifying speed. "You're accusing the COO of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and using an external actor to physically intimidate and frame a corporate auditor. You understand the gravity of that statement." "I am not making a statement, Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice as cold and flat as the glass wall. "I am presenting a finalized evidence chain. If you turn to Exhibit D, you will see the email from Mr. Drell's own corporate account, ordering Mrs. Calder to handle the auditor, me, who had placed a compliance hold on his $275,000 transfer. If you turn to Exhibit G, you will see the metadata from the anonymous HR complaint photo, which originated, verifiably, from Verena's iPhone. And if you turn to Exhibit J, you will see the notarized affidavit from the man they hired, confirming he was directed to my door as part of a setup." Arthur Vance sat down, heavily. My God. Elias Thorne did not flinch. He just read. He lingered on the email from Mason. "Handle it." "He wrote it down," Thorne said. "Not to me, but to the room." He closed the book. "He also, along with Mrs. Calder, filed case 441 against me," I continued. "An attempt to use the morality clause to have me fired before I could present these findings. This entire domestic incident, the assault, the public screaming, was a staged event." "It's a complete, closed loop," Thorne murmured. He looked at me, his eyes analytical, cold. "The evidence is definitive. The board will move to terminate, but it will be messy. Mason will fight." "Which brings me to the 10:00 a.m. town hall," I said. Arthur Vance paled. "You're not serious. You invited them?" "Verena chose a public forum to assault and frame me," I said. "I am choosing a corporate-sanctioned, live broadcasted public forum to present the truth. They are both attending, under the belief that I am the one being disciplined today. They believe this is a celebration of their new foundation. You're going to ambush them in front of 4,000 employees?" Arthur was horrified. "No," I said. "I am going to present an anonymous case study. I am requesting the committee's formal permission to use my allotted 10 minutes to present a case study on ethics, detailing a systemic conflict of interest and attempted obstruction. I will not name Mr. Drell or Mrs. Calder. I will simply present the evidence, the flowchart, the forged invoices, the metadata, the wire fraud email. I slid a single piece of paper across the table. I also require IT to patch an external video file to the main screen. This is the signed release form from the neighbor whose camera recorded the assault. Thorne stared at me. A slow, thin smile touched his lips. He understood. This wasn't a messy, vengeful attack. This was a clean, corporate execution. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a containment strategy. If we fire him quietly, Thorne reasoned, he sues. It leaks. The stock takes a hit. But if he is exposed in a public forum, in his own words, his position becomes indefensible. He will resign before he's halfway to the parking garage. It's clean. He looked at me. You're authorizing this? Arthur asked him, his voice faint. Ms. Calder's analysis is correct, Thorne said. She is not the problem. She has, in fact, presented us with the solution. He walked to his desk and took a sheet of his personal letterhead. He wrote a single sentence and signed it. He handed it to me. Ray Calder has temporary, full immunity as a protected whistleblower per Section 9.c. All actions related to Case 0442 are sanctioned by the Office of the General Counsel. E. Thorne. I assume, Thorne said. You will also need corporate security. They should be discreet, I said, but they should be near the front row exits and near the stage mic. They're already on their way, said Thorne. You have your sanction. Ms. Calder, do not deviate from the facts. I never do, I said. At 9:52 a.m., I was standing in the wings of the main auditorium. The room was packed, the low electric hum of 500 people settling into their seats, the bright, hot lights of the broadcast cameras. I saw them arrive. Verena was a vision. She was wearing a brilliant cream-colored Chanel suit, her hair a cascade of perfect blonde waves. She was radiant. She was glowing with victory. Mason was beside her, looking relaxed, a hand on her back, guiding her. They looked like a power couple. Brenda, the events coordinator, personally escorted them to their seats, the front row. Mrs. Verena Calder, executive director, Clarendon Foundation. Verena saw the placard and touched it, her smile incandescent. She looked around, scanning the crowd, her eyes searching for me. She was looking for the intern, the low-level manager she had crushed. She expected to see me in the back row, humiliated, waiting to be called out. She couldn't see me. I was backstage. The IT tech, a guy named Sal, gave me a thumbs up. Mic is hot, Ms. Calder. Video feed. Klein/cam is patched to input 2. You're on after the CEO's intro. I clicked my lavalier mic on. I checked the battery pack. My hand was not shaking. My heart rate was a slow, steady 65 BPM. The CEO walked on stage to applause. Welcome, Cane Ridge family. I watched Verena on the monitor. She was clapping delicately, her eyes shining. She was looking at the stage, but she was picturing my head on a platter. I opened my notes on the lectern in the shadows. It was a single index card. On it, I had written 3 words: end after climax, no postmortem, the lights, the cameras, the audience. They weren't her stage. They were mine. The CEO finished. And now, for a new segment we're very excited about. Ethics in Action. Please welcome our own Ray Calder from Compliance and Risk. I heard the polite applause. I saw Verena's face on the monitor. Her smile froze. She had not expected this. I picked up the remote for the slides, and I walked out of the darkness, into the blinding white light. The polite applause was a soft, wet sound in the vast auditorium. It died before I even reached the lectern. The lights were hot, white, and clinical. They bleached all the color from the front rows, turning the expensive suits into a uniform sea of gray and black. Behind me, the 50-foot screen glowed with the Cane Ridge Foods logo, and beneath it, our corporate slogan, floating in a friendly, trusting blue font. Trust feeds families. A perfect cynical backdrop. I looked out. I found them instantly. Front row, center, just as I had arranged. Mason Drell, our COO, was leaning back, relaxed, a look of bored indulgence on his face. He was the king, waiting for the peasant entertainment to conclude. Beside him was Verena. She was incandescent. The cream-colored suit was perfect. Her hair was a waterfall of salon-fresh blonde. She was beaming, her face a portrait of magnanimous, triumphant beauty. She had come to watch me die. When she saw me, she nudged Mason, a tiny, subtle gesture. "Look, darling, the little snooper is giving a speech before she's thrown to the wolves." I gripped the sides of the lectern. My voice, when it came out, was amplified, filling every corner of the room. It was not the voice of a victim. It was the voice of a manager. "Good morning. My name is Ray Calder. We in compliance talk a lot about ethics, but the word is meaningless without practical application. So today, I want to present a real-world, anonymous case study, a what-if scenario." In the front row, Verena's practiced smile tightened. This was not the groveling, tear-stained confession she had been anticipating. "The scenario is this," I continued, my cadence deliberate. "What if a high-level corporate leader used their discretionary budget to fund an external foundation? On the surface, it looks like charity, a noble act." Mason's bored expression didn't change, but his ankle, crossed over his knee, began to bounce. "But what if," I said, "that foundation was run, in an honorary capacity, by a close personal relative of that leader? And what if that leader failed to disclose that relationship?" I clicked the remote in my hand. The giant screen behind me changed. The friendly logo was gone, replaced by a stark, black and white flowchart. Slide 1. Let's look at the theoretical money flow. The chart was simple. Cane Ridge, discretionary fund. Foundation tax, $275,000. PR firm Y. Here, we see $250,000 in charitable branding move from our company to this foundation, but look at the foundation's own expenditures. 100% of the funds are then paid to a single vendor, a PR firm. A low murmur, like the buzz of an exposed wire, started in the auditorium. This wasn't a boring ethics brief. This was blood in the water. And who owns this PR firm? In our case study, it's the sister of the foundation's honorary director. I clicked again. Slide 2. The screen filled with a scanned image of an invoice. The logo was distinctive, and though I had technically redacted the name, it was still legible. Glinthouse PR. The line item was clear. Event staffing and personal assist services for foundation mixers. Amount, $75,000. "The shareholder money," I said, my voice cutting through the rising noise, "isn't going to feed families. It's paying for parties." Now, that's enough. Mason Drell was on his feet. He was shouting. But he didn't have a microphone. His face was a mask of livid indignation. "This is inappropriate. This is pure speculation. Sponsorships are complex. This is a gross oversimplification of a normal business arrangement." The broadcast camera, alerted by the motion, zoomed in on him. His furious red face filled a small box on the screen next to the invoice. Verena was tugging on his jacket, her face, once radiant, now pale and papery. "Mason, sit down. Mason," she hissed. I waited. I let his outburst echo. I let the entire auditorium, all 4,000 employees watching live, see the COO shouting down a compliance manager. The room went dead silent. "Thank you for that insight, Mr. Drell," I said, my voice still perfectly, terrifyingly level. "You are correct. This is a complex situation, which is exactly what happens when the auditor who discovers this fraud is targeted for elimination." Mason froze. "In our case study," I said, "what if the auditor who froze these payments was immediately and anonymously accused of a morality violation?" I clicked the remote. Slide 3. The invoice vanished. replaced by the blurry, damning photo. Me in the doorway, Wade, shirtless. It was shocking. I heard hundreds of people gasp. I could feel their eyes darting from the screen to the faint, purple-yellow bruises on my cheek, and back to the screen. They were connecting the dots. "This image," I said, "was sent to HR's anonymous hotline, alleging depraved conduct by the auditor. It was meant to silence her, to destroy her credibility before she could present her findings." In the front row, Verena had stopped breathing. She was staring at the photo. This, she understood. This was her move. "But the anonymous source was sloppy," I said. "They forgot about metadata, a digital fingerprint. Let's zoom in." I clicked slide 4. The screen now showed a screenshot of the image's file properties. A single line of text was circled in bright, damning red. Device name: Verena's iPhone. It wasn't a murmur this time. It was a single, collective sound, a low whoa that sucked the air out of the room. In the front row, Verena made a small, choking sound. "And what of the incident itself?" I continued, my voice picking up the pace. "The anonymous source was not just sloppy, she was theatrical. She forgot about the neighbor's doorbell camera." I clicked the remote. Slide 5. I hit play. The auditorium was plunged into the grainy, black-and-white infrared world of the Klein's front porch. The audio was crystal clear. We saw Wade, shirtless and confused. We saw my door open, and then we saw Verena, in her emerald silk robe, storm onto the porch. Her voice, high and piercing, shrieked from the speakers, "You are humiliating this family!" And then, crack! The sound of the slap was an explosion in the auditorium. My head snapped back with sickening force. People in the audience cried out. Several stood up. On the screen, the video continued. Verena, her hand on her heart, her face a mask of fake, righteous fury, delivering her next line for the other neighbor's camera. "I will tell your father what you are." The video stopped. I froze the frame on Verena's face. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. 4,000 eyes were moving as one. From the frozen image of Verena on the screen, to me, standing under the lights, the physical evidence of that slap still visible on my face, to the front row, where the real Verena sat. She was the color of chalk. The broadcast camera panned, finding her, and her terrified, ashen face filled the 50-foot screen. She looked like she was suffocating. I stepped away from the lectern. "We are so lucky," I said, my voice now soft, but the microphone made it intimate. "To have the architect of this anonymous complaint, the director of the foundation, here with us today, our guest of honor." The camera held on her. "Mrs. Verena Calder," I asked, "would you like to speak?" She half stood, pushed by some broken, autonomic instinct for the spotlight. She saw her own face on the giant screen. She opened her mouth, a small, dark O, but nothing came out. She collapsed back into her chair, a broken doll in a cream-colored suit. "No," I said. Perhaps the other man in the video? The man from the Clarendon Courier?" From the side aisle, a man in a cheap, rumpled suit, walking with a pronounced limp, stepped forward. It was Wade Larkin. A spotlight found him as two of Thorne's plainclothes security guards escorted him, not to the stage, but to a pre-placed floor microphone in the aisle. Mason Drell saw him. He physically recoiled. "Who the hell?" "Mr. Larkin," I said, my voice commanding the room. "Can you please tell us what happened that night? Did you know me?" Wade gripped the mic, his hand shaking, but his voice was clear. No, ma'am, I don't know her. I was working a party at 14A. I was told by Mrs. Calder's assistant, Jen, to go to 14B. She said, "Ray is expecting you." It was a setup. I was told to go to the wrong door. Then that lady, he pointed a shaky finger at Verena. That lady slapped Ms. Calder. "Thank you, Wade. You can go," I said. The security guards escorted him out of the auditorium. "This is a circus. This is a personal matter. This has no place." Mason was on his feet again, shouting, trying to get to the stage, to get to me. He was cut off. A sharp squeal of feedback. Elias Thorne, the general counsel, had stepped up to the main stage microphone from the side wall. He looked calm. He looked, as always, faintly bored. "Thank you, Mr. Drell. That's enough," Thorne's voice boomed, silencing the room. "Based on the evidence presented to the Ethics Committee this morning, including the email, Exhibit D, in which you appear to order the obstruction of a corporate audit, and this public testimony, the board has sufficient grounds to open a formal and immediate investigation into both your fiduciary conduct and your manipulation of the corporate disciplinary process." Mason froze, his foot on the first step of the stage. He looked small. The king was naked. I stepped back to my lectern, all eyes. Every single person turned back to me. They looked at the scratches on my face. They looked at the flowchart still glowing on the screen. "The Morality and Public Trust Clause," I said, my voice clear, ringing through the silence, "was written to protect this company's reputation. It is not a weapon for predators. It is not a whip to beat the auditor who holds them accountable. It is not a tool to silence the people who, in the words of our own slogan," I gestured to the logo on the screen, the words that had been there the entire time, floating above the wreckage, "Trust feeds families," "are just trying to protect the trust." My final word. Trust hung in the air. It was a judgment. It was a sentence. The auditorium was a cathedral of absolute silence. No one coughed. No one shuffled. 4,000 eyes were locked on the three figures in the front row, who were now pinned like specimens under the white-hot lights. The collapse began 10 seconds later. It did not begin with shouting. It began with procedure. Elias Thorne, the general counsel, still holding the microphone, turned his head slightly toward the side stage. "Mr. Vance, as chairman of the Ethics Committee, I believe the floor is yours." Arthur Vance, the old guard lawyer I had met with at 8:30 a.m., walked onto the stage. He looked pale, but his voice was firm. He was a man of process, and the process had been violated. He carried a single sheet of paper, the one Elias Thorne had clearly drafted for him. "Per Article 11, Section 4 of the Cane Ridge Corporate Bylaws," Vance read, his voice devoid of emotion. "The Ethics Committee is empowered to act in emergencies to protect the fiduciary health and reputation of this company. The evidence presented this morning, Case File EC0442, supersedes all other pending disciplinary matters." He looked directly at Mason Drell. "I call an emergency vote of the committee members present." He gestured to 3 other executives sitting in the front rows, the rest of the committee. "All in favor of a motion to immediately suspend Chief Operating Officer Mason Drell, pending a full internal and external investigation into the matters of fraud and obstruction just presented?" The 3 committee members, their faces grim, raised their hands instantly. "All opposed?" No one moved. "The motion carries," Vance said. "Mr. Drell, you are suspended, effective immediately. Your access to all Cane Ridge systems is revoked. Corporate security will escort you from the building." 2 uniformed guards, who had been standing, unnoticed, by the exits, began to walk, not quickly, but with a heavy, deliberate pace, toward the front row. Mason Drell did not move. He was a statue. He was staring at the flowchart on the screen, the one that still showed his name linked to Verena's. He was a man who had just watched his entire life, his entire career, vanish in the space of a 10-minute case study. Next, Vance looked at the head of human resources, a woman named Karen Abbott, who was sitting 3 rows back. She looked like she had just swallowed glass. "Ms. Abbott," Vance continued, his voice relentless, "the committee finds that case file EC0441, my supposed morality violation, was filed in bad faith, using falsified evidence, with the express intent to obstruct a corporate audit, The committee orders this file to be expunged from Ms. Calder's record. HR will issue a formal to public apology to Ms. Calder for its handling of this unverified, malicious report. Karen Abbott stood up, her knees visibly buckled. She had to grip the chair in front of her. Human Resources. We acted on the information we were given. We apologize to Ms. Calder. We retract the complaint. It will be as if it never existed. She sat down, her face crimson. The first domino, the case against me, was gone, vaporized. And that's when Verena finally found her voice. The shock, the paralysis, it all cracked, and the pure, undiluted rage underneath came boiling out. Liar! Her shriek was so high, so primal. It feedback screeched through the sound system for half a second before the tech cut her off. She was on her feet, lunging toward the aisle, her perfect cream suit rumpled, her face a grotesque mask of fury. She's a liar, Her microphone, the small, polite one on the table in front of her honored guest seat, was dead. The event security, the same 2 men in suits who had escorted Wade Larkin, had moved. They didn't touch her. They simply stepped in front of her. They created a quiet, immovable wall of black wool suits between her and the stage. She was screaming into a void. The auditorium could see her mouth moving, her finger pointing at me, her face contorted, but no sound came out. It was a silent movie of a woman's complete and total unraveling. Mason Drell finally moved. He didn't look at Verena. He didn't look at the guards. He simply stood up, shrugged his shoulders to straighten his $4,000 suit jacket, and turned. He began to walk up the aisle, the 2 uniformed guards falling into step just behind him. He didn't run. He walked. It was the longest, most silent walk of shame I had ever witnessed. The entire company watched him go. The whoosh of the auditorium doors closing behind him was the sound of the end of an era. The second domino, the COO, was gone. Now the third, the stakeholders. A man in the 10th row stood up. I recognized him. Marcus Thorne, Elias's older, far more dangerous brother, a notorious activist investor who owned a 2% stake in Cane Ridge. Mr. Vance, he called out, his voice booming without a microphone. Given the clear, documented evidence of systemic fraud, the misappropriation of funds to the Glint House PR firm, he said the name, making it public, permanent, and the gross failure of executive oversight, I, on behalf of the Thorne Investment Group, formally demand an immediate, independent, external audit of all executive discretionary funds for the last 24 months, per bylaw 19C. The board concurs, Elias Thorne said from the stage. A motion for a special audit is approved. The word Glint House was now in the minutes. It was public, in the front row. Verena, who had stopped screaming and was just breathing heavily, her chest hitching, heard the name. She fumbled in her purse for her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely type the passcode. The bright screen illuminated her tear-streaked, makeup-smeared face. She was still. I was watching her from the stage. I saw her shoulders slump. I saw her read a message. I knew, as certainly as I knew my own name, what that message said. It was from her sister. Don't drag me into this. Don't you dare call me. The final betrayal. The rats were not just leaving the ship. They were setting it on fire as they went. Elias Thorne stepped back to the microphone. The room was still reeling, the air thick with the ozone of the explosion. As of this moment, Thorne announced, the Clarendon Foundation and all its affiliates are banned as a vendor, partner, or recipient of any Cane Ridge Foods funds, pending the results of the external audit. Furthermore, he held up the thick, spiral-bound report I had given him at 8:30 a.m. The Office of the General Counsel is formally handing this entire file, including all evidence of conspiracy and wire fraud, to the Grayford County District Attorney's Office. The final domino. This wasn't just a corporate firing. This wasn't just a suspension. This was a criminal referral. I had been standing at the lectern, a silent observer of the wreckage I had caused. The 10-minute presentation had, in 12 minutes, resulted in a COO's termination, a public retraction, a shareholder revolt, and a criminal investigation. The town hall was over. My part was done. I turned, my back to the audience, my back to Verina's collapsed, sobbing form, and walked toward the wings. My work phone, which I'd left on the text table, was buzzing. A new email had come through the high-priority server from Tripoli. The connection from Libya was bad, but the text was clear. From Grant Calder. Subject, livestream. Message, Ray. What is happening? I just saw the livestream. I don't understand. Security is involved. Call me, now. I stood in the shadows of the wings, the noise of the auditorium, people finally standing, talking in shocked, urgent whispers, at my back. I looked at his panicked message. He didn't understand. He was a good man. Blinded by a project. He couldn't see the viper. He couldn't see the fraud. He just saw chaos. I needed to show him the architecture. I hit reply. My fingers were steady. To Grant Calder. Subject, livestream. Message, Dad, I'm fine. Don't call me. Look at the file I sent to your secure drive last night. Message, look at slide 7. Slide 7. The one I hadn't shown in the town hall. The one that wasn't for the company. It was for the lawyers. And for him. It wasn't just the wire fraud. It was the whole board. The one that connected everything. Verina. Mason. Clarendon. Glint House. The setup. The slap. The whole sordid, documented truth. I hit send. I walked out of the wings, onto the now empty stage. The broadcast lights were off. The only light came from the giant, 50-foot screen, which had reverted to its idle state. The corporate slogan, Trust Feeds Families, glowed in the dimness. The bright blue letters were reflected on the polished, black stage floor. I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking, the only sound in the empty space. I stopped. My shoes, a sensible, pointed-toe navy pump, were resting directly on the reflection. I looked down. My feet were planted squarely in the middle of the word trust. I took a deep breath, the first one that didn't feel like it was being drawn through a filter of adrenaline. The air tasted clean. The climax was over. The rest was just procedure. I was halfway down the 54th floor, in the long, sterile artery of glass that connected the executive wing to the main elevator bank. It was a place designed for transparency, a long, hollow tube where nothing could be hidden. The sun, now high in the sky, blasted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, creating a repeating pattern of blinding white parallelograms on the polished marble floor. The entire hallway was an echo chamber. My footsteps were quiet. I had my heels in my hand. I was walking in stockinged feet, my briefcase in the other hand. I wanted silence. I wanted the clean, cold glass and the sterile air. I wanted to be gone. Behind me, I heard a sound. Clack, 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 clack. It was the sound of a small, panicked animal running on a hard surface. The sound of broken, uneven rhythm. The sound of pure, undiluted rage. She must have sprinted from the auditorium, dodging the shocked crowds, leaving her last shreds of dignity on the floor with her dead microphone. Clack, clack, clack. The sound was getting closer, more frantic. I didn't slow down. I reached the central atrium, a vast, open space where the glass bridge met the main elevator bank. I pressed the down button. You! Her voice was not the high-pitched shriek from the stage. It was a low, guttural tear, a sound from the throat, raw and ruined. You ungrateful wretch! I stopped. I did not turn around, not yet. I watched the 54 above the elevator doors. It was not lit. I finally let out the breath I had been holding since 8:30 a.m. I put my heels down, slipped my feet back into them, and slowly, deliberately, turned around. She was a ruin, the woman from the town hall, the incandescent, victorious angel in cream-colored Chanel, was gone. Her perfect blonde hair was a tangled mess, strands of it stuck to the tear-streaked, blotchy mascara running down her cheeks. The jacket of her suit was twisted. She was shaking, a fine, high-frequency vibration, like a plucked string. She stood about 30 feet away, in the middle of the glass bridge, surrounded by blinding sunlight. "You did this," she hissed. Her voice was shredded. I said nothing. I just looked at her. I let her see the fading, purple-yellow map of her own violence on my cheek. "Ungrateful," she spat again, taking a step. "We gave you... your father? I let you stay in that house. I let you eat at our table. And you? You plotted this. You thing." My voice, when I spoke, was quiet. It did not carry the echo of rage. It was as flat and cold as the marble floor. "I didn't do this, Verena. You did." I took one step toward her, back onto the bridge. "You booked the Clarendon Courier. You staged the beer spill. You directed a drunk man to my door." Another step. She flinched, a small, involuntary recoil. "You timed your entrance. You screamed for the neighbor's camera. You took a photo on Verena's iPhone and sent it to my company, trying to get me fired." Another step. I was 10 feet from her. I could smell the sour, acidic note of fear under her expensive perfume. "You wanted human resources to hang me with a corporate morality clause, a clause that I wrote." I stopped. "You didn't plot. You performed. You were just too arrogant to check the metadata." She stared at me, her mouth working, searching for a weapon, for any weapon, and then her eyes, those wide, panicked blue eyes, narrowed. She found it. She found the one knife she had left. She smiled. It was a horrible, jagged expression, a tear in her face. "You think you're so smart," she whispered, her voice suddenly intimate, conspiratorial. "The little compliance manager, the little snooper. You think you won. You think he will choose you?" I didn't move. "He won't. Ray," she purred, the venom returning, thick and strong. "He'll never choose you because you're just her. You're just a bad, boring, failed copy of your mother, and he was bored with her, even before she died." It was a perfect strike. It was the nuclear bomb she had been holding in reserve. She said it to annihilate me, to shatter the cold, procedural shell and find the soft, grieving child underneath, and for one blinding second, she did. The glass hallway dissolved. The sun went white. I wasn't in Halberd Park. I was in the garden at Norwood Lane. I was 9 years old, and my mother was showing me how to stake the tomatoes, her hands covered in dirt, her laugh quiet. "You're my good girl. Ray, my smart, good girl." The memory was a physical, agonizing pressure behind my ribs. It was the core of her hatred. I saw it, in that single, brutal moment. It was never about Mason. It was never about the money. It was about that. It was that I was my mother's daughter, living in my mother's house. I was the living, breathing, walking evidence of a life that came before her. I was the first draft, and she was the sloppy, insecure revision. The pain was immense. And then, just as quickly, my brain did what it was trained to do. It processed. It contained. It filed. Motive, pathological jealousy, familial, status, irrelevant. The white light faded. The glass hallway snapped back into focus. Verena was standing there, her chest heaving, her face flushed with her final, hateful victory. She was waiting for me to cry, to scream, to break. I did not break. I simply blinked. "You're right," I said. Her victorious smile wavered. This wasn't the reaction she wanted. "I am like my mother," I continued, my voice still quiet. "She was a botanist. She was meticulous. She kept notes. She labeled everything. She believed in structure. She believed in consequences. You're right. I am her copy." I pulled my personal phone from my pocket. "But your analysis is flawed. The question was never, who will he choose?" I unlocked the phone. I opened my secure email folder. I found the file Grant Calder had sent me 2 weeks ago. The question, I said, is who did he trust? I held the phone out to her. On the screen was a PDF, a temporary, notarized power of attorney, hereby grant my daughter, Ray Calder, full and sole custodial authority over the property at 14 Norwood Lane, Wexley, full access to all domestic accounts, sole signatory power for the household safe, all insurance policies, and all domestic vendor contracts, effective immediately until my return. His signature was at the bottom. Verena's eyes darted across the text. She read it. She read it again. The color. The triumphant, hateful red that had flushed her cheeks, drained away. It left her skin the color of wet cement. She understood, in that moment, that she was never the partner. She was the project. She understood that Grant, my good, blind father, wasn't quite as blind as she'd believed. He had, in his own way, installed a failsafe. He had installed me. The house, I said, slipping my phone back into my pocket, is my responsibility. The accounts are my responsibility. The security is my responsibility. I looked her in the eye. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. From now on, Verena, all parties at Norwood Lane are over. The accounts are frozen, pending my father's return. The catering services are canceled. The Glint House PR invoices will not be paid. Her entire body was shaking now. Her hand, which had been balled into a fist, was trembling. "You will regret this, Ray," she whispered, but the words had no power. They were an echo. "No," I said. "You will." I turned my back to her. The elevator dinged. The doors had arrived. I lifted my work phone. I opened my contacts. I found the number for my father's personal attorney. I did not call. I sent a text. I typed it slowly, deliberately. Each tap of the glass was a final, punctuating period. Lawyer Ellison, this is Ray Calder. Per my father's authorization, it is time to change all security protocols at the Norwood Lane property, effective immediately. Please terminate all existing access codes, except for mine. Terminate all Smart Hub privileges. Full system wipe. I hit send. The heavy glass-paneled elevator doors slid open with a quiet hiss. I stepped inside. Verena was still standing on the bridge. She was a silhouette, trapped in the blinding white light. Her shadow, cast by the afternoon sun, was impossibly long, stretching down the hallway, a dark, thin, empty shape, a shadow with nothing left to hold on to. As the doors began to close, I put my hand to my cheek. The skin was tender, the bruise a dull ache. I thought of the slap, the sound it made, the crack in the midnight silence, on my skin. There was still a faint, pink-red line from where her nail had cut the deepest. It was just a line, the kind you draw under a word, the kind you use to mark the end of a chapter. The chapter was finished. The heavy steel doors thudded shut, and I was gone. The descent from the 54th floor was silent. I did not lean against the wall. I stood in the center of the small, mirrored box, my briefcase in one hand, my heels back in the other, my stockinged feet on the cold floor. The car did not hum. It just fell, smooth and fast, a controlled drop. I watched the numbers flicker down, 50, 42, 30. With every 10 floors, I felt another layer of the last 48 hours peel away, the adrenaline that had felt like a steel rod in my spine, holding me upright in that auditorium, was finally dissolving. It left behind a vast, clean, hollow exhaustion. The hot, bright rage I had felt in the glass hallway with Verena was gone, cooled by the procedural victory. The ache in my cheek was just a dull, physical fact, like a sore muscle, the face of Mason Drell, slack-jawed and gray, as he was escorted out, the sound of Verena's final, useless shriek, cut off by a sound tech, the sight of Elias Thorne, our general counsel, holding my spiral-bound report like a weapon. These things were no longer in my head. They were files. They were artifacts, logged and saved, their purpose served. The elevator dinged. The doors opened onto the main atrium. It was almost 11:30 a.m. The cavernous white marble space was largely empty. The town hall attendees had dispersed, scattering back to their cubes and offices, carrying the story with them. The ones who remained were clustered in small, shocked groups, their voices a low, urgent murmur that was swallowed by the sheer volume of the space. They were talking, but it all sounded like static. I walked toward the main entrance, my heels still in my hand. The click, click, click of Verina's rage was gone. My own footsteps were silent on the stone. I pushed open the heavy glass side door, avoiding the main revolving doors, and stepped out onto the wide granite plaza in front of the Cane Ridge Foods global headquarters. The world was bright. The rain had stopped. The front that had been sitting over Grayford for 2 days had finally broken, and the sky was a high, pale, brilliant blue, scoured clean. The pavement of the plaza was still damp, and it reflected the bright, hazy sky, making it look as though I were stepping out onto a platform of clouds. The air, after the recycled, refrigerated atmosphere of the building, was a shock. It was cool, damp, and smelled of wet pavement and car exhaust. It smelled real. I stopped at the top of the wide steps, the city of Grayford sprawling out before me, and I took my first real breath. It wasn't a gasp. It wasn't a sigh of relief. It was just a breath, an intake of new air. The hot, dry, suffocating world of Norwood Lane. The stage-lit drama of the auditorium. The blood sport of the executive wing. It was all behind me, encased in the glass and steel tower at my back. I was outside. My personal phone, in my briefcase, began to ring. It was a sharp, digital sound in the sudden quiet of the plaza. I knew who it was. I set my briefcase down. I sat on the top step, a small, navy blue figure in a vast, empty plaza. I pulled out the phone. The screen was cracked from a drop 3 months ago. The name on it was Dad. It wasn't a phone call. It was a video call. From Tripoli. I answered it. The connection was terrible. A mess of stuttering pixels. The audio a storm of static. It took a long 10 seconds for the image to resolve. And then he was there. My father. Grant Calder. He was not in his hotel. He was sitting in the back of a moving vehicle, a Land Cruiser perhaps, wearing a light blue linen shirt, the collar damp with sweat. He looked old. He looked exhausted. The skin under his eyes puffy. The lines on his forehead deeper than I remembered. The Libyan sun, streaming in through the car window, was harsh. He was not speaking. The audio was muted. Or perhaps he just wasn't talking. He was just looking. His eyes, my eyes, found me through the small, dirty lens. He looked at my face. I saw his gaze flicker. Just once, to the left side of my face, to the faint, purple-yellow map her nails had left. He saw it. His expression did not change. He did not gasp. He did not look angry. He just registered it. A fact. An exhibit. He, too, was a man of procedure. He had seen the live stream. He had received my text. He had, by now, opened his secure drive and looked at slide 7. He had seen the entire closed loop, the fraud, the conspiracy, the assault, the whole ugly, documented truth. He had seen the names, Mason, Verena. He looked at me, this man who I loved, this brilliant, kind, blind man who had invited a monster into our home. He looked at me for a long, long time. Then he did not speak. He just nodded. It was a small, tight, definitive gesture, an acknowledgement, an approval, a conclusion. The nod said, "You did what was necessary. You did what I could not." My throat felt tight. I did not cry. I just looked back at him. "I'm okay, Dad," I said, my voice quiet. But the microphone was good. I paused. That wasn't the right report. That wasn't the mission. "I'm okay," I said again. my voice stronger. I upheld the law, and I kept the house safe. I kept it safe. From her. From them. The thing you asked me to protect. He nodded again. His eyes, for the first time, looked relieved. The weight of his own blindness, his own mistake, was finally being lifted, not by him, but by me. The connection broke. The screen went black. The call was over. I sat there for another minute, the phone heavy in my lap. I was just empty. In the distance, at the edge of the sprawling corporate campus, a vehicle was turning into the side entrance, the one reserved for service and security. It was not a Cane Ridge vehicle. It was a Grayford County police cruiser. Black and white. It was not moving quickly. It had no lights, no siren. It was just arriving. It was procedural. Elias Thorne had made the call, the criminal referral. They were here, as he had promised, to pick up the file, to collect the spiral-bound report that was my life's work for the past 48 hours. I watched the cruiser disappear behind the West Wing, toward the loading docks that led to the General Counsel's office. It was no longer my file. It was no longer my problem. The state had it now. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text message. It was from Wade Larkin. Ms. Calder. I'm sorry about that night. About everything. My ankle is sprained. But I'll be okay. Thank you. Thank you for letting me tell the truth. I looked at his words. The man from the porch. The shirtless, drunk actor in Verena's play. He was just a guy named Wade, worried about his job, who got caught in a machine. He was the one piece of human collateral. I typed back a reply. My fingers were steady. You're welcome. Wade. The truth is always simply dressed. I hit send. He was right. Verena had needed a costume, an emerald silk robe, a cream Chanel suit, a mask of virtue. Mason had needed a costume, a COO title, a veneer of philanthropy. The truth just needed a polo shirt, a sprained ankle, and a microphone. I finally stood up. I put my phone away. I picked up my briefcase. I slipped my heels back on. The click of the leather seating into my stockinged heel was a final, satisfying sound. I was dressed. I was back in uniform. I turned and walked toward the main revolving doors. As I approached, I saw the giant digital poster in the atrium, the one that usually displayed benign reminders about benefits enrollment or the company picnic. It was cycling through slides. One slide was our old, tired slogan, "Trust feeds families." I felt a surge of cold, hard cynicism. And then, the slide changed. A new one, in a new, sharp, modern font. It was just white text on a blue background. It read, "Ethics isn't a weapon, it's a window." The company was already moving. The narrative was already being rewritten, absorbed, and repurposed. My single, violent act of compliance was already being turned into a corporate memo. A window. I thought about that. A window. Something you look through to see what's real. Something that lets the light in. I walked toward the revolving door. The glass moved to meet me, its polished surface catching my reflection. I saw myself. A woman in a navy suit, her hair in a tight knot, a faint purple bruise on her cheek, a warrior in a corporate uniform. I pushed through. The glass spun, and for a half second, my reflection was overlaid on the new slogan in the atrium behind me. My own body, my own shadow, cut the words in half. Ethics, window. I was the one who had passed through it. The door spun one more time, and I was on the other side. The air of the atrium was sealed off. The air of the city hit me. The glass door whispered shut behind me, a long, clean, satisfying shush, a single, straight, clean line. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know what you think. Drop a comment below and let me know where in the world you're listening from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this, please, show your support. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Like this video, and if you really want to help it reach more people, smash that hype button. It makes a huge difference. Thanks again.